There are times when you feel it, don't you? That feeling of insecurity, like it's gripping your heart, holding you back, and whispering all the things you fear most into your ear. You know exactly what I mean. It's that moment when you look in the mirror and wonder, am I enough? Or when you scroll through your phone and see others living the life you think you should have, and it makes you question your own worth. Let's be real, we've all been there. In fact, most of us deal with it more than we care to admit. But here's the truth. Feeling insecure isn't a reflection of who you are. It's a reminder of who you're becoming. It's a signal. It's telling you something about your mindset, your fears, and the way you view the world. And let me tell you, it doesn't have to stay that way. First, let's address the root of insecurity. Why do you feel it? Why does it seem like every time you step out, you feel the weight of doubt creeping in? It's because you're comparing yourself to others. You're measuring your journey by someone else's success. You're trying to live up to a standard that wasn't set for you, but someone else. It's like trying to wear someone else's shoes and wondering why they don't fit. But here's what you need to realize. Comparison will always steal your joy. It'll always take your peace and it'll leave you empty. When you compare yourself to someone else, you'll always find something lacking. They're taller, smarter, wealthier, more successful. It feels like you're always a step behind. But that's the lie that the enemy tries to get you to believe. And here's the thing, comparison is the thief of your calling. It steals the focus from what God has specifically designed for you and distracts you with someone else's path. God didn't create you to live their story. He created you to live yours. Your life is yours alone. Your journey is unique. Your purpose is yours. And if you keep looking to someone else to find your value, you'll never see what you're truly capable of. You'll miss the gifts and talents God has placed inside of you to make a difference in the world. The enemy doesn't want you to realize that you have everything you need within you to overcome your insecurity. Another reason we feel insecure is that we place too much of our identity in things that are temporary. Our job, our social media presence, our relationship status. These things are not bad in and of themselves, but they don't define who you are. Your worth isn't tied to how many followers you have or how many likes you get on a post. Your value isn't determined by your job title or the car you drive. All of those things can fade away in a moment. But there is something that remains unshaken, something that can never be taken from you, God's love for you. When you know who you are in Christ, when you understand that your identity is not based on the opinions of others, you begin to rise above the insecurity that once held you captive. When you realize that you are a child of the Most High God, you stop measuring yourself by what you do or don't have. You start realizing that your value is not based on your performance, but on His promise. That's where true confidence comes from. Insecurity also stems from a fear of failure. What if I mess up? What if I don't succeed? What if I'm not good enough? We play out these scenarios in our heads, thinking that failure is the end of the world. But let me tell you this, failure is not fatal. It's simply a part of the process. It's not a sign that you're not good enough. It's proof that you're trying, you're stepping out, you're daring to do something great. Every successful person you admire has failed at some point. Every person you think has it all together has had moments of doubt and insecurity. The difference is they didn't let failure define them. They didn't let it hold them back. They didn't let it stop them from continuing the journey. Failure is just a stepping stone. It's not a destination. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay to feel uncertain. It's okay to feel like you don't have it all figured out. You don't need to have every answer. You just need to keep moving forward. But what's holding you back from doing that? What's holding you back from stepping out in faith, from walking in your purpose? It's the lies you're listening to. It's the voices of doubt, of shame, of fear that you're allowing to speak louder than the truth of who you are. The enemy loves to feed us lies. He loves to whisper that we're not good enough, not capable, that we'll never make it. But here's the thing, those lies are not your truth. Your truth is that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Your truth is that you have been chosen for a purpose that only you can fulfill. Your truth is that with God, nothing is impossible. And when you begin to believe the truth, insecurity has no place in your life. The moment you stop allowing insecurity to control you is the moment you start walking in your God-given power. You were never meant to shrink back. You were never meant to stay stuck in a place of self-doubt. You were meant to rise. You were meant to shine. You were meant to be a beacon of hope and strength to the world around you. So don't let insecurity define your story. Don't let it stop you from pursuing your dreams. Don't let it rob you of the joy that comes from knowing who you are in Christ. Instead, let your insecurity be the thing that propels you forward. Let it be the fire that ignites your passion. Let it be the fuel that drives you to take the next step, even when you're not sure how it's all going to work out. Because God is with you. And if He is for you, who can be against you? When you measure yourself against others, you lose sight of the unique purpose God has for you. Focus on your own journey. Your worth isn't tied to success, social status, or opinions. It's rooted in God's unwavering love for you. Failing doesn't mean you're not good enough. It means you're trying. Every great person has faced failure, but they didn't let it define them. Doubt, fear, and shame are tools the enemy uses to hold you back. Recognize them as lies and replace them with God's truth. Insecurity isn't meant to define you. It's meant to be overcome. Step forward in faith, knowing that God is with you. We live in a world where comparison is unavoidable. From the moment you wake up and scroll through social media, you are bombarded with images of people who seem to be living a better life, achieving more, succeeding faster, and doing everything you wish you could do. It feels like you're always a step behind, like no matter how much you try, you will never measure up. But the truth is, that feeling is not a reflection of your worth. It's the result of looking at a race that was never meant for you to run. Comparison will always steal your joy. It will always leave you feeling like you are not enough, because when you compare yourself to someone else, you are measuring your success by their standard. But here's the problem. Their journey is not yours. The calling on their life is not the calling on your life. The gifts, talents, and purpose God placed inside of you were meant to be lived out in your unique way, not as a duplicate of someone else. Too often people chase after things that were never meant for them because they see someone else succeeding in it. Instead of asking, what has God placed in me? They ask, why don't I have what they have? But when you focus on someone else's race, you lose sight of your own. You begin to doubt what God has given you. You start to think that your talents are not enough, your purpose is not significant, and your journey is too slow. But God did not make a mistake when He created you. He did not forget to give you something you need. He designed you exactly the way you are for the purpose He has set before you. Comparison doesn't just rob you of joy, it robs you of progress. You can't move forward in your calling while constantly looking to the side. Imagine a runner in a race. If they keep looking at the person next to them, they lose focus, they slow down, and sometimes they even stumble. The fastest way to trip up in life is to keep looking at someone else instead of staying focused on your own path. The enemy knows this, and that's why he loves to distract you with comparison. Because if he can get you to doubt yourself, if he can get you to believe that you are not enough, then he can keep you from stepping into the purpose God has for you. But here's what you need to realize. The success of others does not take away from your own potential. Just because someone else is winning does not mean you are losing. The blessings God has for someone else do not mean there is less for you. When you trust that God has a plan for you, you stop worrying about what he is doing in someone else's life. You begin to focus on what he is doing in yours. And the moment you stop comparing is the moment you start walking in freedom. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with comparison is because they don't truly believe that they have something valuable to offer. They look at others and think they have the talent, they have the connections, they have the opportunities. But what they don't see is the struggle behind the scenes. What they don't realize is that every person who seems successful had to go through their own process to get there. And more importantly, what they don't recognize is that they too have something inside of them that is worth bringing to the world. When you start seeing your own value, you stop craving what others have. When you start embracing the gifts God has given you, you stop wishing for someone else's. The goal is not to be like them. The goal is to be fully you, to become everything God has created you to be. And that only happens when you stop letting comparison steal your calling. So much of our insecurity comes from where we place our identity. We live in a world that constantly tells us that our value is based on what we do, what we achieve, how we look, and what other people think about us. From the time we are young, we are conditioned to believe that success is what makes us worthy. We believe that if we just accomplish enough, earn enough, look a certain way, or gain the approval of others, then we will finally feel secure. But the problem with that mindset is that it places your identity in things that can change, things that can be taken away, things that will never be enough to truly satisfy you. When your worth is based on your achievements, what happens when you fail? When your identity is tied to your job, what happens if you lose it? When your confidence comes from your appearance, what happens when you don't feel attractive? If your sense of value is built on things that are temporary, your confidence will always be fragile. You will always feel the pressure to prove yourself, to keep up, to strive for more, because deep down you believe that if you stop achieving, you stop mattering. It is something that has already been given to you. God did not create you so that you could spend your life trying to prove yourself. He did not design you to chase after validation from the world. The world will tell you that you have to be successful to be valuable, but God says you are valuable simply because He created you. The world will tell you that you have to work harder to be enough, but God says you were enough before you ever did a single thing. The moment you understand that your identity is not based on your performance, but on His promise, insecurity begins to lose its grip on you. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with insecurity is because they are constantly seeking approval. They want to be liked. They want to be accepted. They want to be seen as important. And while there is nothing wrong with wanting connection and encouragement, the problem comes when your self-worth is dependent on the opinions of others. Because the truth is, no matter how hard you try, not everyone will like you. Not everyone will approve of you. Not everyone will understand you. And if your confidence is based on their validation, you will always feel like you are not enough. You don't need people's approval to be valuable. You don't need their applause to know that you matter. You don't need their recognition to confirm your purpose. What other people think about you does not define you. What they say about you does not determine your worth. The only opinion that truly matters is the one God has already spoken over you. He calls you chosen. He calls you loved. He calls you enough. And that is not based on anything you have done. It is based on who He is. If you build your identity on things that fade, your confidence will fade with them. But when you root your identity in something unshakable, you will stand firm no matter what comes your way. If your confidence is in your job, what happens when you go through a season of struggle? If your confidence is in your success, what happens when things don't go according to plan? If your confidence is in people's opinions, what happens when they change their minds? The only way to live free from insecurity is to place your identity in something that cannot be taken away. God's love for you does not change. His purpose for you is not dependent on how well you perform. His plan for your life is not shaken by your mistakes. When you understand that, you stop striving for validation that you already have. You stop chasing approval that you don't need. You stop trying to prove something that has already been settled. So many people are exhausted because they are trying so hard to be enough. They are running themselves into the ground, trying to meet a standard that was never meant to define them. But real peace comes when you realize that you are already enough, not because of what you do, but because of who you are in Him. You don't have to fight for your worth. You don't have to earn your value. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. The moment you embrace that truth is the moment insecurity starts to lose its power over you. Failure is one of the biggest fears people carry. It's the reason so many hesitate to step out, to try something new, to take risks, or to pursue what God has placed on their hearts. Deep down, there's this lingering question: what if I fail? What if I give my best and it's not enough? What if I try and I fall flat on my face? What if I step out and people see me stumble? That fear keeps people stuck. It keeps them playing small. It keeps them from walking in the fullness of their potential. But what if failure isn't what you think it is? What if failure is not the end of the road, but part of the journey? People tend to view failure as something that defines them. They believe that if they fail, it means they are not good enough, not capable enough, or not worthy of success. But failure is not a reflection of your worth. It is a necessary step in the process of growth. Every person who has ever accomplished something great has faced failure. Every person you admire has had moments when things didn't go as planned. The difference between those who succeed and those who stay stuck is not the absence of failure, but the refusal to let failure define them. Some of the greatest lessons in life come from failure. It teaches resilience. It teaches patience. It teaches perseverance. Failure forces you to grow in ways success never could. It exposes areas that need refinement. It reveals weaknesses that need strengthening, and it builds the kind of character that can sustain success when it comes. Because the truth is, success without struggle often leads to pride, but success that comes through failure produces humility, wisdom, and endurance. So many people quit too soon because they assume that failure means they are on the wrong path. But failure is often a sign that you are stepping out, that you are taking risks, that you are moving in faith rather than fear. If you never experience failure, it probably means you are not pushing yourself beyond what is comfortable. Growth requires stepping into the unknown. It requires doing things you have never done before. And anytime you do something new, there is a chance you will fail. But that failure is not a stop sign, it's a lesson. It's a redirection. It's a stepping stone to something greater. The enemy loves to use failure to make you doubt yourself. He wants you to believe that because you failed once, you will fail forever. He wants you to think that because you stumbled, you should stop walking altogether. But just because you failed doesn't mean you are a failure. Just because you made a mistake doesn't mean you are a mistake. Your failure does not define you. God's purpose for your life does. And if He has called you to something, no amount of failure can disqualify you from what He has planned. One of the most powerful things you can do is shift your perspective on failure. Instead of seeing it as proof that you are not enough, see it as evidence that you are growing. Instead of viewing it as a reason to quit, see it as an opportunity to learn. Instead of allowing it to break you, let it build you. Every failure contains a lesson, and those lessons will shape you into the person you were meant to be. There will be times when failure feels overwhelming. There will be moments when you question if it's even worth continuing. But in those moments, remember that failure is not the end of your story. Some of the most successful people in history failed more times than they succeeded. The difference is they kept going. They refused to let their setbacks define them. They saw failure as a teacher, not an enemy. You are not meant to live in fear of failure. You are meant to step out in faith, to trust that even when things don't go as planned, God is still working. Failure is not a sign that you should give up. It's a sign that you are in the process of becoming who you were always meant to be. Insecurity doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't just appear out of thin air. It is planted, nurtured, and fed by something deeper. One of the greatest sources of insecurity is the lies the enemy tells you. He knows that if he can get you to believe a lie, he can keep you from walking in confidence. If he can get you to doubt yourself, he can hold you back from stepping into your purpose. And the way he does this is subtle. He doesn't come at you with obvious, blatant attacks. Instead, he whispers lies that sound like your own thoughts. Lies that say, you're not good enough. You'll never measure up. You're not as talented as they are. You don't have what it takes. And over time, if you keep listening to those lies, they begin to shape how you see yourself. The enemy doesn't have to destroy you to stop you. He just has to make you doubt yourself. He knows that if he can get you to question your worth, you will hold yourself back. If he can make you believe you are inadequate, you will disqualify yourself before you even begin. That's why insecurity is such a powerful weapon. It keeps you trapped in your own mind. It keeps you stuck in hesitation. It makes you play it safe instead of stepping out in faith. And the worst part is, most people don't even realize where their insecurity is coming from. They assume it's just how they are. They think it's just their personality. But in reality, insecurity is often the result of believing a lie for too long. The enemy wants you to focus on everything you are not. He wants you to magnify your weaknesses, your flaws, your shortcomings. Because if you spend all your time looking at what you lack, you will never recognize what you have. You will never see the gifts, the potential, the calling that God has placed inside of you. Instead, you will live your life feeling like you are always one step behind, never quite enough, always needing something more before you can fully step into what God has called you to do. But here's the truth. The enemy wouldn't be attacking you if you weren't a threat. He wouldn't be feeding you lies if there wasn't something valuable inside of you. Insecurity is often a sign that there is something powerful within you that the enemy is trying to keep hidden. He doesn't want you to see your worth. He doesn't want you to walk in confidence. Because the moment you recognize who you truly are, the moment you realize the power God has placed inside of you, his lies lose their grip. The only way to defeat insecurity is to replace the lies with truth. You have to recognize the thoughts that don't come from God and refuse to let them take root. Every time the enemy tells you that you are not enough, remind yourself that you were created with purpose. Every time he tries to make you believe that you don't have what it takes, remember that God has already given you everything you need. When he whispers that you are unworthy, remind yourself that your worth is not based on what you do, but on who God says you are. The battle against insecurity is not just about thinking more positively. It's about renewing your mind. It's about being intentional with what you believe. If you feed yourself lies, insecurity will grow. But if you feed yourself truth, confidence will grow. That's why it matters what you allow into your heart and mind. It matters what you listen to. It matters what you speak over yourself. If you constantly entertain negative thoughts, you will live in insecurity. But if you start to declare truth over your life, insecurity begins to lose its power. You don't have to live under the weight of insecurity. You don't have to accept the lies the enemy has been feeding you. You were created for more. You were made to walk in confidence. Not because you are perfect, not because you have it all together, but because God's power is at work within you. And when you start to believe that, when you start to recognize that the enemy's lies have no authority over you, that is when you begin to step into the life God has called you to live. Insecurity will always try to make you shrink back. It will tell you to stay quiet, to stay small, to avoid taking risks, to never step out of your comfort zone. It will make you second guess yourself at every turn, convincing you that you are not ready, that you are not good enough, that you are not capable. And if you listen to those thoughts long enough, they will shape your decisions. They will keep you from applying for that opportunity, from speaking up when you have something to say, from taking a step toward the dreams that God has placed in your heart. Insecurity doesn't just affect how you see yourself, it affects what you allow yourself to do. It will keep you on the sidelines watching others live boldly while you convince yourself that you are not meant for more. You were created to step forward. You were meant to rise, to walk in confidence, to take hold of the life that God has called you to live. And that doesn't mean you will never feel insecure. It doesn't mean you will never have moments of doubt. But it does mean that you don't have to let insecurity control you. You don't have to let it be the thing that dictates your choices. You don't have to let it hold you back from the fullness of your purpose. There will always be reasons to stay where it's comfortable. There will always be a voice telling you to wait until you feel ready. But here's the truth. You will never feel fully ready. You will never reach a moment where all fear and doubt disappear. The key is not waiting until you feel fearless. The key is moving forward in spite of fear. Confidence is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting that even when you don't, you are still called to move forward. Every person who has ever accomplished something meaningful had to face insecurity. They had to battle thoughts of self-doubt. They had to push through feelings of inadequacy. The difference between those who rise and those who shrink back is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move in faith. It is the decision to believe that what God has placed inside of them is greater than the fear that tries to hold them back. It is the refusal to let insecurity define them. When you allow insecurity to rule your life, you end up living beneath your potential. You settle for less than what you were created for. You stay in places you were meant to outgrow. You keep your voice quiet when you were meant to speak. You keep your gifts hidden when you were meant to share them. And eventually, if you keep shrinking back, you start to believe that maybe you were never meant for more. But that is not the truth. The enemy would love for you to believe that you are supposed to stay small. He would love for you to convince yourself that playing it safe is the right choice. But safe does not lead to growth. Comfort does not lead to calling. If you want to step into the life God has for you, you have to be willing to move forward, even when insecurity tries to hold you back. Rising up doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out. It doesn't mean you will never struggle with self-doubt. It simply means you refuse to let those things stop you. It means that when insecurity whispers, you can't, you choose to believe that God says you can. It means that when fear tells you to sit down, you stand up anyway. It means that when you feel unqualified, you remind yourself that God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. You were not meant to shrink back. You were not meant to live small. There is more inside of you than you realize. There is strength in you that you haven't tapped into yet. There is purpose in you that insecurity has tried to bury. And the moment you decide to rise, despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the uncertainty, it's a moment you begin to walk in the fullness of who you were created to be. Insecurity will always try to convince you that you are not enough. It will remind you of every flaw, every failure, every shortcoming. It will make sure you remember every moment you fell short, every time you were overlooked, every mistake you ever made. It will keep replaying those memories in your mind, making you believe that your past disqualifies you from the future God has planned for you. But the truth is, insecurity is nothing more than a voice trying to keep you from stepping into who you were always meant to be. It is an illusion that loses its power the moment you refuse to believe it. The enemy knows that if he can keep you insecure, he can keep you stuck. He can keep you from walking in confidence, from taking risks, from embracing the fullness of what God has placed inside of you. That's why he works so hard to make you doubt yourself. That's why he attacks your mind with thoughts of comparison, with feelings of inadequacy, with whispers of not enough. Because as long as you believe those lies, you will never rise into the person God has called you to be. But when you recognize that those thoughts are not from God, when you begin to challenge the lies with truth, that's when everything starts to shift. You are not defined by what you feel. You are not defined by the voice of insecurity. Just because a thought enters your mind doesn't mean it has to take root in your heart. Just because doubt creeps in doesn't mean it has to shape your decisions. Feelings of insecurity may come, but they don't have to stay. You have the power to reject them, to replace them with truth, to remind yourself of what God has already spoken over you. He has called you chosen. He has called you loved. He has called you enough. And his voice is the only one that truly matters. Insecurity will always point to what you lack, but God always points to what he has placed inside of you. It will try to convince you that you need to be more, do more, achieve more in order to be valuable. But God says that before you ever did a single thing, you were already valuable. Before you accomplished anything, you were already enough. Before you proved yourself to anyone, you were already called. You do not have to spend your life striving to be worthy of love, acceptance, or purpose, because those things were already given to you before you even took your first breath. There will be moments when insecurity tries to make you question everything. It will make you doubt whether you really have what it takes. It will make you wonder if you are really strong enough, smart enough, capable enough. But in those moments, you have a choice. You can either believe the lie or stand on the truth. You can either let insecurity hold you back, or you can rise up in faith, trusting that even if you don't feel enough, God is more than enough in you. Confidence does not come from perfection. It does not come from never failing, never making mistakes, never feeling weak. Confidence comes from knowing that even in your weakness, God's strength is made perfect. It comes from understanding that your worth is not tied to your performance, your success, or the approval of others. True confidence is not built on what you do. It is built on who you are. And when you know who you are, insecurity begins to lose its grip. Comparison will try to rob you of confidence. It will make you look at what others have, what others are doing, how others are succeeding, and convince you that you are falling behind. But you were never meant to run someone else's race. You were never called to follow someone else's path. The moment you stop trying to measure up to others and start embracing the unique purpose God has for you, that's the moment insecurity starts to fade. You don't need to be like them. You don't need to have what they have. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. You are already enough as you are. Fear of failure is one of insecurity's greatest weapons. It will make you hesitant, cautious, afraid to step out of your comfort zone. It will whisper that if you try, you might fall. But failure is not final. It is not the end of your story. It is simply a lesson, a stepping stone, a part of the process. Every great success story is filled with moments of failure. But the difference is, those people didn't let failure stop them. They didn't allow a moment of setback to define them. They kept going, kept growing, kept believing that there was more ahead. And that is exactly what you have to do. There is a version of you on the other side of insecurity that is bold, confident, and fully alive. There is a version of you that no longer hesitates, no longer shrinks back, no longer allows doubt to determine your decisions. That version of you is not created by waiting for insecurity to disappear. It is created by moving forward in spite of it. It is created by taking steps of faith even when fear is still present. It is built in the moments when you decide that insecurity will not have the final say over your life. You were not created to live in fear. You were not designed to stay small. There is something inside of you that the world needs. There is a gift in you that no one else can bring. There is a purpose over your life that no one else can fulfill. And the longer you allow insecurity to keep you silent, the longer the world goes without experiencing the fullness of what God placed inside of you. You don't have to have it all figured out to step forward. You don't have to wait until you feel completely confident before you take action. Confidence is built in the process. Strength is built in the moments when you refuse to let insecurity win. Freedom is found when you choose to believe what God says about you over what fear says about you. And when you do that, when you stop letting insecurity dictate your life, when you start walking in faith, even when you feel afraid, that's when everything begins to change. There is more in you than you realize. There is potential inside of you that insecurity has tried to keep hidden. There is strength in you that fear has tried to convince you isn't there. And the moment you choose to rise, the moment you choose to trust that God has already given you everything you need, is the moment insecurity loses its power. You don't have to keep questioning if you are enough. You don't have to keep wondering if you have what it takes. You don't have to keep living in doubt, fear, and hesitation. You were made for more. You were created for something greater. And the moment you start believing that, the moment you stop letting insecurity write your story, is the moment you step into the fullness of the life God has called you to live.